we're going to be looking at our favorite and also kind of the most iconic movies of each decade. So we're not like including movies that really span across a large decade. So that's why you might not see something like Star Wars on this list, because it's been from the 70s to the 2010s. There's always been a movie. But that being said, let's just get right into it.
So my favorite movie of the 1950s is War of the Worlds from 1953. And I just love the movie because it's one of the most classic sci-fi movies ever made about aliens invading the world and how the people of the world react and then eventually get the aliens to leave. It's a good cast, there's good acting, very good special effects. For the 1950s, and a good storyline and a good twist at the end on how they solve the problem. So I very much like the movie, and that's why it's my favorite 1950s movie.
My pick for the 50s would be 12 Angry Men, which just demonstrates like the power of having a good theme, great cast, good dialogue, and just a really well thought out plot that doesn't have to rely on fancy set pieces or like fancy places, scenes. It just relies on like the characters.
My favorite movie of the 60s is 2001: A Space Odyssey, made in 1968. It is one of the most well-known sci-fi movies ever made, and the cinematography in the movie is amazing, and the storyline is amazing, and how it messes with your concept of time and space. It's just a really like eye-opening movie, and that's why I picked that as my favorite movie of the 1960s.
Then my next pick for the 60s would be The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly by Sergio Leone, starring Clint Eastwood. It's one of my favorites, actually. It has a super cool musical component with very famous music that really adds the tone. It does have like the anti-hero that wasn't really taking place anywhere else, and it was really like revolutionary for the time. And it's just a really gripping story with huge, very intriguing set pieces that really grab your attention.
My favorite movie of the 1970s is, of course, The Godfather, made in 1972. This is, in my personal opinion, the best movie ever made because of the acting in it is amazing, the storyline is so intricate, and there's so much symbolism and foreshadowing, and how it all just, the cinematography is amazing, it all just comes together as an amazing movie. It's my personal favorite movie ever. And I could watch this over and over and over again and never get bored. It's such a good movie. So I would recommend that if you have the ability, you should watch The Godfather right now if you haven't already.
My pick for the 70s would be Rocky. It's just a classic. I mean, Sylvester Stallone does a great job. I mean, it just gets you hyped. I don't know what else to say. Hey guys, so I was gonna at this point have the Rocky music going. Ever increasing to a climax to get you hyped, but it's copyrighted, so.
Now, my favorite movie from the 80s, this was sort of a tough one, but I went with E.T. the Extraterrestrial, made in 1982. It is probably the most well-known sci-fi movie. I know I picked a lot of sci-fi movies, but this is a very good movie, even like outside of the sci-fi arena. The way that they take E.T. and give him such human qualities and allow him to relate and grow with the characters. And it's such a well-made movie. The cinematography is amazing. One of the most well-known scenes of all time when they're going across the bike across the moon. It's just an extremely well-made movie. So that's why it was my favorite movie from the 1980s.
My pick for the 80s would be The Raiders of the Lost Ark. So Indiana Jones, I mean, classic of the classics. Kind of what the 80s is all about, you know, like the big franchises. Tough pick between Star Wars and The Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I thought like this was really pertinent to the 80s compared to how Star Wars has gone on throughout all the different decades. And so, yeah, this was just one of my favorites. Really good action. I mean, Harrison Ford's a legend, he does a great job. It's really cool. Kind of has that cool persona going on. It's just one of my favorites.
Now, my favorite movie from the 90s is The Truman Show from 1998, starring Jim Carrey. And Jim Carrey's an amazing actor on his own, but this is probably my favorite movie of his, and it's definitely my favorite movie of the 90s because of just the cinematography in it is amazing. The overall plot of it is amazing. Has one of my favorite scenes in movies when he walks up the steps, and if you've seen the movie, then you know what I'm talking about, and if you're not, then you should go see it. You can find out what I'm talking about. But just the whole concept of how he slowly realizes what the reality of his life is just such an amazing development for his character. And that's why it was my favorite movie from the 1990s.
My pick for the 1990s would be Shawshank Redemption. It's probably one of the best instances of where you have narration. So that would be Morgan Freeman's characters. It follows this really interesting plot. It has great character development. The characters are some of the best that I've seen. You get really attached to them, and so that creates a really compelling story. And the plot just helps further the characters' stories and helps develop them further. And it's also really just powered by really strong acting.
My favorite movie from the 2000s is The Dark Knight, starring Christian Bale and Heath Ledger. And both of their performances are amazing. Christian Bale is personally my favorite Batman, and Heath Ledger did such an amazing job as the Joker, and he deserved the Oscar he got. And it's not just the acting, the script is amazing, special effects are amazing, action sequences are amazing, and the storyline is so good. But I just love that movie so much, and it's probably my favorite superhero movie ever made, and it deserved all the awards and accolades it got, and that is why it is my favorite movie from the 2000s.
For the 2000s, we have Inglourious Bastards, which is probably my favorite Tarantino movie, and we have to give him a shout here. So it's pretty good. It has a great villain. So like Christoph Waltz, he does a great job with the villain of the movie. He's really compelling. I mean, he speaks 4 different languages. It's pretty crazy. So that was really interesting. I mean, the suspense and the tension buildup is really good in that movie as well. And I mean, it has some of like the best action and great dialogue as always, and as you would expect. And it's also really funny at times.
My favorite movie from the 2010s is Parasite, made in 2009. It won Best Picture award, and it deserved it. It's an extremely good movie. We actually have a video on the movie that you should definitely watch, and you should also definitely watch the movie. All of the cinematography is amazing. The symbolism is amazing. The acting is amazing. It's just overall a very well-made movie. And the storyline, it goes from like a comedy movie to a thriller to a horror movie. It's such a good, like, I wouldn't say horror, but it's basically a comedy thriller that develops over time. And I just really like that movie, and that is why it is my favorite movie of the 2010s.
Now coming in for the 2010s, we have The Social Network, directed by David Fincher, and it follows the story of Facebook, the foundation of Facebook, and it really just shows like the greed they all have, but it's really like a universal story about like a couple college kids just doing this cool thing. And David Fincher makes the most like simplistic things, such as like a little Raw Race, super suspenseful. I think Hans Zimmer did the score, which explains a lot. And yeah, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. So I think it's really representative of the 2010s.